Can improvisation be taught? In this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the skills and processes involved in musical improvisation, and I think it'll become clear that improvisation is a skill that can be taught, it can be practiced, and people can get better at it over time through working at it. And I think any remaining difficulties that people may have in developing the skill of improvisation can be easily explained without needing to deny the basic fact that improvisation is a skill that can be taught. Now, the whole question of how can I learn how to improvise can be explored by asking three questions. Those three questions are: what style do you want to improvise in? What mood or feeling do you want the music to evoke or express? And how do you create those characteristics on your instrument? So the first question is, what style do you want to improvise in? The reason this question is relevant to improvisation is that when people want to develop the skill in improvisation, they generally have some idea, however vague, of the kind of music that they wish they could improvise, or they've heard someone else improvising and they've gotten their idea from that, well, I wish I could improvise like that. The next question is, what mood or feeling do you want the music to evoke or express? In any given style of music, a variety of moods and emotions can be expressed within the boundaries of those styles. And so we ask ourselves, once we know what style we're basically thinking of, we ask ourselves, what feeling am I going for? Or what effect am I trying to produce with improvisation, by improvising music? And then the third question, how do you create those characteristics on your instrument? Because you might be able to know what you want to hear, but there inevitably comes the question of how do you actually play that on your instrument? And so this has to do with developing actual technical skill and understanding of what a particular shape on, for instance, the piano produces a particular sound, either in chords or in melodies, how to make different sounds on your instrument. And these are questions that belong to musical composition generally, and not just improvised music, because improvisation is merely musical composition on the spot. So these questions would be asked anyway of any kind of composition, and in fact any kind of art form, not just music. For this reason, whenever I teach other people to improvise, I always ask them these questions. What style do you want to improvise in? Whether it's jazz or in classical. And once I know what they're really interested in playing, then I start teaching them the fundamentals of that style, and I get them playing various things that are often done in that style. So for instance, if it's classical music, we will learn about the major scale, for instance, and then the chords that are derived from that scale, and then the inversions of those chords, and then learn how some patterns in those styles. Those are just uses of the chords that are taken out of the scale, and playing regular patterns. This is like an Alberti bass pattern taken into the right hand. Yeah, but that's just the notes in that chord. That's just one example. And then learning about passing notes between the chord tones. So there's my chord, and the notes in between are the notes that actually take me from one note in the chord to another note in the chord. So these are very ordinary figurations that are commonly used. And that's just some examples in classical. When I teach jazz, I always start with blues because it has a very distinct style and distinct sorts of harmonies. So we start by learning about 7 chords. And get the students accustomed to playing those shapes. And then we think about the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. And we go through the whole 12-bar blues progression. Now, after that, we end up talking a bit about swing rhythm. So instead of having straight quavers, dun 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 dun, we have swing, which is a very common element of jazz. So dun 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 dun. Yeah. Yeah. Now this isn't really something that's so commonly done in that way in jazz, but this is something. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and we go through the whole chord progression. After that, we go adding things like the walking bass line. Because I'm trying to get the students used to playing those elements that are very typical to blues and jazz style. And then we experiment with rhythms in those style. And not everything is premeditated. Not everything is spontaneous. There are some things that are premeditated. So, for instance, this walking bass line is taught note by note, for instance. But some of the rhythms are not. Some of the rhythms are taught, but then I encourage the students to make up their own rhythms in the right hand while playing the bass line. And that is a kind of improvisation. And I think what should become plain from all of that is that improvisation involves a knowledge of the aspects of a style. And so it's not entirely spontaneous as if we're producing absolutely new music that has never been heard before in any sort of way. We are still being inspired by ordinary conventions of a style, but we are combining them and shaping them and choosing them as we wish, while retaining certain aspects because we're trying to actually reflect that style and we like that style, we're working in that style. So those are some processes, but when we're doing that, we're acquainting ourselves with the feel of the rhythm, the shapes on the keyboard, if we're doing piano, which is what I do, and we're trying to develop proficiency in that, but we're also doing things that are new. We're combining them in new ways, or ways that we are deciding on the spot. After they have gotten reasonably comfortable with those chords, then what I get them to do is practice a walking bass line. But I get them to play each note in the scale twice and in a swing rhythm like this. And that becomes something that they can use in their improvising. So, for instance, I throw in some chords. And there they're making up their own melodies using some restrictions that I've placed on them, namely the blues scale and a particular walking baseline. But they're choosing their notes themselves, they're experimenting, and they're aiming finally for a mood. So, and I might even just tell them the mood. And for the sake of being easy, I often just tell them, well, you know what, this is pretty tricky to manage, so we're just going to keep it nice, smooth, cool, slow blues. So. So there are some things I threw in that were extra, but that's what we've got. So I hope that makes a little bit evident that improvisation is a skill that can be taught and can be practiced. There are most certainly elements of it that must be practiced, or there are skills that need to be cultivated. Some people will develop those skills faster because maybe they've kept certain habits of mind throughout life and been practiced in other things like physical coordination on that fine motor skill level. Other things like that help piano playing as well as other disciplines in life. Well, I hope that was helpful to you. All blessings.